Before I get into everything, before I tell you how I ended up sitting in that courtroom watching my cousin's faces drain of color, I want to know one thing. Where are you watching this from right now, and what time is it over there? Drop your city and time in the comments. It always gives me strength, knowing how far these words travel. I'm going to start with the moment my life nearly ended. Not a slow, quiet kind of ending. The violent kind. The kind where you're lying on a floor that smells of pine sol and old linoleum, staring up at a ceiling you've known since you were 6 years old, and you can feel something warm spreading beneath you. And you just know, that it might be your baby leaving your body. I was 3 months pregnant. Barely showing. Luke and I had only told Graham about the pregnancy. We were waiting until the second trimester to announce it, because after 2 years of trying, 2 years of negative tests and quiet crying in the bathroom, we were terrified of jinxing it. Graham had cried when I told her. Actual tears rolling down her papery cheeks. She'd cupped my face in both hands and said, "Finally, sweet pea. Finally, something good." That was 8 weeks before she died. The day of the funeral, the sky over White Pine was the color of dirty dishwater. Low clouds hung over the ridge behind the farm like they couldn't decide whether to rain or just stay there and make everything feel heavier. I remember standing at the graveside in my one decent black dress, the one that was already a little tight around my middle, and watching my cousins Trent and Jenna make a big show of their grief. Jenna sobbed loud enough for the whole cemetery to hear. Trent stood with his head bowed, one hand pressed against his chest like he was holding his heart inside his body. I knew them well enough to recognize a performance when I saw one. My name is Clara. I'm 32 years old, an elementary school teacher, and for most of my life, I was the girl who lived out on the old Whitmore farm with her grandmother. My mom, Graham's only biological daughter, died when I was 2. A car accident on I-81. I don't remember her. My dad was never really in the picture before that, and after the accident he disappeared completely. Moved to Florida, started a new family, sent a Christmas card maybe twice. So Graham raised me. She was the only mother I ever knew. The farm is 120 acres of rolling pasture, old-growth hickory trees, and one stubborn creek that floods every spring. There's a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, built in 1912 by Graham's grandfather. The paint peels every August, and every September I'm out there with a scraper and a bucket of primer. I've been doing it since I was 12. Trent and Jenna are not Graham's grandchildren. They're the children of Graham's niece Carol, who died of cancer 10 years ago. Graham took them in for a couple of years when they were teenagers, after Carol's husband went to prison. They lived in the farmhouse with us. It was supposed to be temporary. Graham treated them like they were her own. She bought them school clothes, packed their lunches, sat through parent-teacher conferences. And for a while, I tried to think of them as my brother and sister. But they never thought of me that way. To them, I was the orphan girl who'd gotten lucky. The charity case who didn't know her place. Trent used to call me the stray when Graham wasn't in earshot. Jenna would go through my closet and take whatever she wanted, and when I complained, she'd say, "Calm down, it's not like you paid for it." They moved out at 18 and never looked back. For the next 15 years, they showed up maybe twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and only when they needed something. A loan that was never repaid. A place to crash between jobs. Graham's signature on a car title. I watched it happen, year after year, and I bit my tongue because Graham loved them. She always believed they would grow up eventually. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who drove her to chemotherapy every Tuesday morning in Johnson City, 45 minutes each way. I was the one who sat in the plastic chair beside her bed, grading spelling tests while poison dripped into her veins. I was the one who held the bucket when she got sick at 3 in the morning. And I was the one who was there, in the hospital room, on the last night of her life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the kitchen. Because that's where everything shattered. The funeral ended around 2 o'clock. A handful of neighbors came back to the farmhouse afterward, the way people do in small towns. They brought casseroles and sympathy and that particular kind of awkward silence that fills a house after a death. I moved through the rooms in a fog, accepting hugs from people whose names I couldn't remember, my hand resting instinctively on my belly. Luke was outside, helping direct cars away from the muddy patch near the barn. He'd been my anchor all day. Tall and solid, with hands that could fix a diesel engine or cradle a newborn chick, depending on the need. He'd known Graham almost as long as I had. He'd asked her permission before he asked me to marry him. That's the kind of man he is. By 4 o'clock, most of the guests had left. It was just me, Luke, Trent, Jenna, and a few stragglers in the living room. I was in the kitchen, stacking dirty plates in the sink, when Trent walked in with an envelope I'd never seen before. He was wearing a cheap black suit that didn't fit him right. The sleeves were too short, showing the thick gold watch he'd bought himself after his last business venture, some kind of scheme that had burned through most of Graham's small savings before I found out and put a stop to it. He had the same smirk on his face that I remembered from high school. The one that said he knew something you didn't. "Clara," he said, "we need to talk." Jenna appeared behind him, arms crossed, dressed in a black pantsuit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She'd done something with her hair, it was blonder now, pulled back tight, making her face look sharper, hungrier. She didn't say anything. She just stood there and watched. Trent pulled a folded document from the envelope and spread it on the kitchen counter. I could see Graham's signature at the bottom. My heart lurched. "What is that?" I asked. "It's the new will," Trent said. His voice was calm, almost bored, like he was reading a weather report. "Graham changed it 3 months ago. She left the farm to me and Jenna. Equal shares." I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. They were English, but they didn't fit together in my brain. "That's not possible," I said. "Graham had a will. She made it years ago. The farm goes to me. We talked about it." "She changed it," Jenna said flatly. "People change things all the time." She realized it wasn't fair for one person to get everything. I reached for the document. "Let me see it." Trent snatched it back before my fingers touched the paper. "You can see it when our lawyer sends you a copy. This is the original." "Your lawyer?" I could feel my voice climbing, the shock giving way to something sharper. "Trent, we just buried her. We just put her in the ground. And you're standing here telling me she cut me out of her will 3 months ago? That doesn't make any sense. I was with her 3 months ago. She never said anything." "Maybe she didn't trust you," Jenna said. "Maybe she finally saw what we've always known, that you were just hanging around for the inheritance." The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. My hand went to my stomach, that protective instinct kicking in before my brain could even process the insult. "Get out of this kitchen," I said. My voice was shaking. "Get out of my house." Trent laughed. He actually laughed, a short ugly bark. "That's the thing, Clara. It's not your house. It's ours now. And we're going to be generous. We'll give you 2 weeks to move out. You can take your personal things. But the farm? The equipment? The land? It belongs to us." I don't know what I would have done next. Maybe I would have screamed. Maybe I would have grabbed that paper and torn it to shreds. But I never got the chance, because that's when Jenna stepped forward and shoved me. It wasn't a hard shove. Later, her lawyer tried to call it a light push. But I was off balance, exhausted from grief, my center of gravity already shifting in ways I wasn't used to. I stumbled backward, my feet tangling in the edge of the old braided rug Graham had kept under the kitchen table for 40 years. I reached out for something, anything, and my hand caught the edge of the counter. It wasn't enough. I went down hard, my hip slamming against the corner of the oak cabinet before I hit the floor. The impact jarred through my entire body. A sound came out of me that I didn't recognize, a kind of animal gasp, air forced from my lungs by the shock. And then I felt it. A cramping, twisting pain low in my belly. I looked down and saw a small red stain blooming through the fabric of my dress. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." Jenna looked at me. Her expression didn't change. She didn't move to help me. She stepped around my body, careful not to get anything on her pantsuit, and grabbed a bottle of wine from the counter. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You always were." Trent folded the will back into the envelope. He looked down at me the way you'd look at a broken appliance, mildly annoyed, nothing more. 2 weeks, he said. "Be out." And they walked out of the kitchen. I lay there on that cold linoleum floor, the same floor I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees every Saturday morning when I was a kid, and I felt the blood spreading beneath me. I could hear voices from the living room, someone laughing about an old memory. I could smell the funeral flowers wilting on the dining room table. And I could feel something terrible happening inside my body, something I couldn't stop. I tried to scream. The first time, nothing came out. My throat was locked, my whole body frozen in a kind of terror I'd never experienced before. I thought about the baby, my baby, Luke's baby, the one we'd waited so long for. I thought about Graham, lying in her hospital bed, telling me to take care of the farm. I thought about all the years I'd spent biting my tongue, making peace, hoping that if I just tried hard enough they would finally see me as family. The second time I screamed, it tore through the house like a siren. Luke was the first one through the door. My husband, who had been standing out in the yard talking to the last of the funeral guests, burst into that kitchen and saw me on the floor, and something in his face broke open. He dropped to his knees beside me, his big hands gentle on my shoulders, his voice cracking as he said my name over and over. "Clara. Clara, look at me. What happened? What happened?" "She pushed me," I gasped. "Jenna pushed me. And they said, they have a will, they said the farm is theirs." I couldn't finish. The cramping was getting worse. Luke's eyes dropped to the blood on my dress, and I watched the color leave his face. "Somebody call 911, he roared. "Right now." The next few minutes are a blur. I remember being lifted onto something soft. I remember the ceiling of the ambulance, bright white lights sliding past. I remember a paramedic asking me questions I couldn't answer, her face kind but urgent. I remember Luke's hand gripping mine, squeezing hard, as if he could hold me in this world through sheer willpower. At the hospital, they took me straight back. Someone cut my dress off. Someone else pressed a cold ultrasound wand against my stomach. I stared at the ceiling and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. "Please. Please don't take this too." When the doctor finally came back with the results, I was prepared for the worst. But she said, "The baby's heartbeat is still there." I broke down completely. Not crying. More like coming apart at the seams, all the terror and relief hitting me at once. Luke buried his face in my hair and I felt his tears on my scalp. The doctor said I had a subchorionic hemorrhage, a bleed caused by the trauma of the fall. Serious. I would need bed rest for weeks. There was still risk. But the baby was alive. That night, I lay in my hospital bed in the dark, listening to the beep of monitors and Luke's steady breathing from the cot beside me, and I thought about Trent and Jenna. I thought about that paper on the counter. I thought about the way Jenna had stepped over my bleeding body for a bottle of wine. And for the first time in my life, I let myself feel the full weight of my anger. It wasn't hot. It wasn't wild. It was cold and still and deep, like water at the bottom of a well. I stared at the ceiling and I made myself a promise. They thought I was weak. They thought I would roll over, like I always had. They thought a piece of paper was all they needed. They had no idea what Graham had left me. And they had no idea what I was capable of. The hospital released me 3 days later with a stack of discharge papers and strict instructions: bed rest, no stress, no lifting, and absolutely no arguments with anyone who might raise my blood pressure. The last one was hard to promise, considering what was waiting for me back in White Pine. Luke drove me home in his old Ford pickup, the one with the cracked leather seats and the radio that only picked up the AM gospel station. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around mine, his thumb rubbing slow circles across my knuckles. Neither of us talked much. The silence between us was heavy but comfortable, the kind you earn after years of loving someone through hard things. The farm looked different when we pulled up the gravel drive. It shouldn't have. The same white farmhouse, the same sagging barn, the same line of hickory trees standing guard along the ridge. But something had shifted in the way I saw it. For the first time in my life, this place felt fragile. Like it could be taken from me. "They're not taking this from us," I said finally, standing by the truck. "No," Luke agreed. "They're not. To explain how we got here, I have to take you back. Back to the beginning, or at least the beginning that matters. The farm on Briar Hollow Road has been in Graham's family since before Tennessee was a state. The original land grant was signed in 1794, and somewhere in the county archives there's a yellowed document with a wax seal and cursive so ornate you can barely read it. My grandmother, Agnes Ruth Whitmore, was born in the same bedroom where she would eventually die. She was the last of the Whitmores. My mother, Sarah, was her only child. And I am the only child my mother had before that icy night on I-81 took her away. So when people in town talked about the Whitmore girl, they meant me. When they talked about the Whitmore farm, they meant the place where I grew up. There was never any question, not in anyone's mind, about who would inherit it. Until Trent and Jenna showed up. They arrived in August of my 13th year. I remember because the tomatoes were coming in heavy, and I'd spent the morning pulling hornworms off the vines, dropping them into a bucket of soapy water. Graham called me up to the house, and when I came through the back door, there they were, two rangy teenagers sitting at the kitchen table, looking at everything with the hooded suspicion of kids who'd learned early that the world wasn't safe. Trent was 15. He had sandy hair that fell into his eyes and a faint scar above his left eyebrow that I would later learn came from his father's belt buckle. Jenna was 14. She was already pretty in a hard way, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that moved around a room constantly, cataloging exits and weaknesses. Their mother, Carol, had been Graham's niece, the daughter of Graham's younger sister, who had died of a stroke a decade earlier. Carol had married a man named Ricky Duval, and Ricky had turned out to be exactly the kind of man you don't want marrying into your family. He drank, he gambled, he broke things when he was angry, and eventually he broke someone badly enough that the state of Tennessee sent him to prison for 12 years. Carol couldn't cope. The cancer was already eating at her by then, though she didn't know it yet. She showed up on Graham's porch one afternoon, thinner than she should have been, with her 2 kids and a trash bag full of their belongings. She asked Graham to take them. Just for a while. Just until she got back on her feet. Graham never turned away family. It wasn't in her wiring. Carol died 2 years later. The cancer moved fast and quiet, the way it does when people don't have health insurance and avoid doctors until it's too late. By the time they caught it, it was everywhere. Trent and Jenna never went back to their father. Graham wouldn't have let them, even if Ricky had gotten out of prison, which he didn't. He died of a heart attack in his cell 3 years into his sentence. So they stayed. And from the beginning, it was complicated. Here's the thing about growing up in a house where you feel like an outsider, it makes you mean. I don't say that to excuse what Trent and Jenna did to me later. There's no excuse. But understanding them meant understanding that they had been broken long before they arrived at our door. They had learned, in their own childhood, that the world was divided into people who took and people who got taken from. And they were determined never to be on the wrong side of that equation again. The first year was the hardest. Trent would go through my things when I was at school. He took my father's old pocket knife, the only thing I had left of him, and traded it for something at school. When I confronted him, he laughed and told me I should thank him. "It's not like you ever knew the guy," he said. Jenna was subtler but crueler. She would say things that sounded like compliments but landed like cuts. "It's so brave of you to wear your hair like that," she told me once, in front of 3 girls from my 8th grade class. I could never pull off the messy look. My hair was just brushed. I had gotten up at 5 that morning to help Graham with the milking. I learned to hide my things. I learned to keep my mouth shut. I learned that complaining to Graham only made things worse, because Graham would try to mediate, and mediation always ended with Trent and Jenna resenting me more. Eventually, they did move out. Trent left at 18, the day after his birthday. He went to Knoxville, where he'd gotten a job at a call center. Jenna left a year later, moving to Nashville to pursue music, which meant she waited tables and auditioned for things she never got. I breathed a sigh of relief when the last box was packed. But they kept coming back. Always with a reason. Always with a need. Trent's car broke down. Could Graham co-sign a loan? Jenna's landlord was evicting her. Could she stay in the spare room for just a few weeks? Trent had a business opportunity, a sure thing. He just needed a little seed money to get it started. He'd pay it back, he swore. He always swore. And Graham, God love her, kept saying yes. Not because she was stupid, she was one of the sharpest women I've ever known, but because she believed, with a faith that was almost religious, that family was family. That you didn't give up on people. That love, if you gave it long enough and hard enough, would eventually fix whatever was broken. Graham and I had our only real fight about it when I was 24, home from college for the summer. Trent had just talked her into mortgaging a piece of the back pasture to fund some kind of import business. He's never going to pay you back, I told her. You know that, right? Graham was sitting in her rocking chair on the porch, shelling peas into a chipped enamel bowl. She didn't look up at me. Maybe not, she said. But what am I supposed to do, Clara? Let him lose everything? Let him end up like his daddy? I can't do that. I won't. So instead you lose everything? The farm? Your retirement? She stopped shelling and looked at me. Her eyes were tired but steady. This farm isn't going anywhere, she said. I made a will, Clara. It's all taken care of. Everything goes to you. I can't turn my back on them. I can't be that person. I dropped it. What else could I do? She was a grown woman, and it was her land, her money, her choice. I told myself that as long as the will was solid, as long as the farm was protected, I could live with the rest of it. That was my mistake. I trusted a piece of paper I'd never seen. I assumed Graham's wishes would be respected just because they were her wishes. I didn't know how easy it was for a determined person to forge a signature. I didn't know how simple it was to file a fake document with a county clerk who didn't look too hard at things. There were so many things I didn't know. But the night after the funeral, in my hospital bed, I found something. Luke had gone to the cafeteria to get coffee. I was alone, still groggy from the medication, still terrified every time I felt a twinge in my belly. I asked the nurse if someone could bring me my bag from the funeral, a small leather purse I'd grabbed when we left the house that morning. When the nurse brought it, I dug through it slowly. Tissues. A program from the funeral service. My phone, dead. A tube of lip balm. And at the bottom, something I didn't remember putting there. It was a small leather-bound Bible, worn at the edges, the gold lettering on the cover almost rubbed away. I recognized it immediately. Graham's. The Bible she'd kept on her nightstand for as long as I could remember. I didn't understand how it had gotten into my purse. I had been at the house for maybe 2 hours between the cemetery and the kitchen. I hadn't gone into Graham's bedroom. I hadn't even been upstairs. But someone had put this Bible in my bag. And as I opened it, my hands shaking, I realized there was something tucked inside the front cover. A sealed envelope, with my name written on it in Graham's handwriting. I stared at that envelope for what felt like a long time. I was afraid to open it. Afraid of what it might say. Afraid that it might confirm that Graham really had changed her will, that she really had chosen Trent and Jenna over me. But Graham had never let me down before. Not when it mattered. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 things. The first was a letter, 3 pages long, written in Graham's shaky cursive. The second was a photograph, an old one, faded and creased, showing a young woman standing in front of the farmhouse with a baby on her hip. Graham. And me. And on the back of the photograph, in handwriting that was sharper than the letters, written earlier, before the sickness had stolen her steadiness, were 3 lines. Cloud login, Agnes Whitmore 84. Password, Sweet Pea 1938. Look at the video from March 14th. I didn't have a laptop with me. I didn't have my phone charger. I couldn't look at anything from my hospital bed. But I held that photograph and that letter against my chest, and for the first time since I'd hit the kitchen floor, I felt something other than fear. I felt like my grandmother was still in the room with me. I felt like she'd known. And I felt like whatever was on that video was going to change everything. The next morning, when Luke brought my charger and I finally got my phone powered on, I had 17 missed calls. 11 from a number I didn't recognize. 6 from Trent. I didn't call him back. Instead, I handed the photograph to Luke and watched his face as he read the back. His jaw tightened. His eyes went hard in a way I'd only seen once before, when a drunk driver had sideswiped our truck on the highway and Luke had gotten out to confront him. It was the look of a man who was about to protect his family with everything he had. "I'll get my laptop," he said. "No," I said. "Take me home first. I want to be in Graham's house when I watch it. I want her to be there with me." We checked out of the hospital earlier than the doctors wanted. I signed a form promising I'd stay in bed. I promised Luke I'd take it easy. He looked at me with the exhausted, loving skepticism of a man who'd been married to me for 6 years and knew exactly how well I kept promises about resting. The drive back to White Pine took an hour. Luke's laptop was in his work bag in the back seat. The photograph was in my hand. The letter was still unread. I wanted to read it in Graham's house, sitting in her chair, with her things around me. When we pulled up the gravel drive, the farmhouse looked the same as it always had. White paint peeling, porch swing swaying slightly in the breeze, the old barn cat watching us from its perch on the fence. But there was a piece of paper taped to the front door. Luke got out and grabbed it. When he came back to the truck, his face was dark. He handed it to me. It was typed, not handwritten. Official looking. Notice to vacate. Pursuant to the last will and testament of Agnes Whitmore, the property located at 1427, Briar Hollow Road, White Pine, Tennessee, is now owned by Trent Duval and Jenna Duval. All current occupants are required to vacate within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in legal action. At the bottom was the name of a law firm in Knoxville. 14 days. They had filed an eviction notice while I was still in the hospital. "Help me inside," I said to Luke. "I want to read Graham's letter. And then I want to see what's on that video." He carried me up the porch steps, one arm under my knees and one behind my back, the way he'd carried me over the threshold on our wedding night. Except this time, the house didn't feel like a honeymoon. It felt like a battlefield. Luke settled me into Graham's old recliner in the living room, the one that still smelled faintly of her lavender hand lotion. He propped pillows behind my back, tucked a blanket around my legs, and set a glass of water on the side table. Then he pulled up a chair beside me and waited. I unfolded the letter. "My dearest Clara. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope you're reading it in my house, sitting in my chair, with a cup of tea. You always did make my tea just right. I have so much I want to say to you, and so little time left to say it. The doctors tell me weeks, maybe days. My handwriting is getting worse by the hour, so I'll keep this short. First, and most important, you are the daughter I always wanted. I know I was never your mother by blood, but in my heart, you were mine from the moment they put you in my arms. You have been the greatest joy of my life. Watching you grow up, watching you become the woman you are, it has been my privilege. My sweet pea. Second, the farm is yours. It has always been yours. I made a will with Attorney Morrison in White Pine 15 years ago, and I have never changed it. I never will. If anyone tells you otherwise, they are lying. Third, I need to tell you about something that happened on March 14th of this year. Trent and Jenna came to see me in the hospital. I didn't tell you about it at the time because I didn't want to upset you while you were dealing with the pregnancy and everything else. But I knew something was wrong the moment they walked into the room. I set up my phone to record before they came in. I don't know why, just a feeling I had, I suppose. The good Lord gives us instincts for a reason. The video will explain everything. I put it in a cloud account. I know you young people understand all that. The login is on the back of the photograph. Watch it. And then, sweet pea, do whatever you need to do. Don't let them take what's yours. Don't let them take what I built for you. I love you more than words can say. I'll be watching over you. All my love forever. Graham. I read the letter twice. The first time, tears blurred my vision so badly I could barely make out the words. The second time, I read it slowly, letting every sentence sink in. March 14th, I said to Luke. That was about 2 months before she died. She was still lucid then. Still sharp. Let's watch it, Luke said quietly. He pulled out his laptop and set it on the ottoman in front of us. I read him the login information from the back of the photograph, and he typed it in. The screen loaded to a simple cloud storage page. There was only one file, a video dated March 14th. Luke clicked play. Graham's face filled the screen. She was propped up in her hospital bed, the pale blue blanket pulled up to her chest. Her hair was thin from the chemo, wrapped in the silk scarf I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked tired but alert, her eyes sharp and clear. The camera was positioned at an angle. She must have set the phone on the bedside table, propped against something. You could see the door of the hospital room in the background. This thing on? Graham's voice came through the laptop speaker, and I felt a sob catch in my throat. It was her voice. Her real voice, not the weak whisper of her final days but the firm, no-nonsense tone I'd heard my whole life. Okay. I think it's recording. I'm going to leave this running because I have a bad feeling about today. On the screen, Graham adjusted her scarf and settled back against her pillows. She picked up a magazine from the side table and began flipping through it. About 3 minutes passed. Luke and I watched, barely breathing. Then we heard the door open. Trent walked in first. He was wearing a polo shirt with a logo I didn't recognize, and he was carrying a manila folder. Jenna followed behind him, dressed in a navy blazer, looking like she was heading to a business meeting. Neither of them looked like people visiting a dying relative. They looked like people closing a deal. Graham, Trent said, his voice oozing false warmth. How are you feeling today? I'm dying, Trent, Graham said flatly. How do you think I'm feeling? Jenna pulled up a chair beside the bed. We wanted to talk to you about something important, Graham. About the farm. On the screen, Graham set down her magazine. What about it? Trent opened the manila folder and pulled out a document. We've been talking to a lawyer. A good one. And he said that if you really want to protect the farm, you need to update your will. Make sure it goes to people who can manage it properly. People like you? Graham's voice was dry as dust. Claire is not capable of running a farm, Graham, Jenna said. She's a teacher. She doesn't know anything about agriculture or business. We have connections. We could develop the land, make it profitable again. The land is profitable, Graham said. It's been supporting this family for over 200 years. Clara knows exactly how to run it. Trent leaned forward. Graham, be reasonable. Clara's going to sell it. You know she will. She doesn't have the money for the taxes, for the upkeep. She'll sell it to developers, and the Whitmore farm will become a subdivision. Is that what you want? Clara would never sell that farm, Graham said, and I heard the steel in her voice. She loves it as much as I do. Then why not put it in writing? Jenna's voice turned hard. If you're so sure, why not update the will and make it official? Because the will is already official. It's been official for 15 years. Trent's expression changed. The fake warmth drained away, replaced by something colder. Graham, we're not asking. We're telling you. Sign the new will. I watched my grandmother's face on the screen. She didn't look afraid. She looked furious. Get out, she said. Graham. I said get out. Both of you. Get out of my room, and don't come back. Trent stood up. He grabbed the unsigned document from the bed and shoved it back into his folder. Fine, he said. But you're making a mistake, old woman. You think Clara's going to take care of you? She's going to put you in a home the first chance she gets. While you're lying here dying, we're the ones trying to help you. Help yourselves, you mean, Graham said. I've known what you two are for a long time. I kept hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. Jenna stood up and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame and looked back over her shoulder. When you're gone, she said quietly, we'll take it anyway. One way or another. Then they left. The video continued for another 30 seconds, Graham staring at the door, her hands trembling, her mouth set in a hard line. Then she reached toward the camera and the video stopped. Neither Luke nor I spoke for a long moment. Then Luke said, quietly and with absolute certainty, we're going to destroy them. That night, Luke and I sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen where I'd nearly lost our baby, and we planned our counterattack. Luke had a yellow legal pad in front of him. I had Graham's letter, the Bible, and the photograph. First things first, Luke said. We need a lawyer. A real one. Not a guy in White Pine, someone who knows estate law and isn't afraid of a fight. The eviction notice came from a firm in Knoxville, I said. Dawson and Associates. That's who Trent and Jenna are using. Then we need someone bigger. Someone in Nashville. Luke spent the next morning making calls. By noon, he had found a firm in Nashville that specialized in estate litigation. The lawyer's name was Margot Price. When Luke explained the situation, the fake will, the hospital video, the physical assault, Margot didn't hesitate. I'll take the case, she said. Have your wife send me the video and the letter. I need to see everything. I sent her the files that afternoon. Margot called back within 2 hours. The video is gold, she said. Clear evidence of undue influence, attempted coercion, and a direct threat. But we need more. Do you have any idea how they might have created the fake will? I thought about it. Graham mentioned her original lawyer, a man named Morrison in White Pine. She said he drafted the real will 15 years ago. I'll track him down, Margot said. In the meantime, I want you to be very careful. Don't engage with Trent or Jenna. Don't answer their calls. Let everything go through me. That was easier said than done. The next morning, I woke up to find a white sedan parked at the end of our gravel drive. 2 men in suits were standing beside it, taking pictures of the farmhouse. What are you doing? I called from the porch. Property assessment, one of them said. We work for Dawson and Associates. Get off my land. This isn't your land, ma'am. According to county records. According to county records, the property is still in my grandmother's name pending probate, I said, my voice harder than I felt. You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff. They left. But they were back 2 days later, this time with a third man who carried a clipboard and walked the fence line, making notes. Luke confronted him, and the man claimed he was from the county assessor's office. When Luke called the county to check, they had no record of sending anyone. They're trying to wear us down, Luke said that night. Make us feel like we've already lost. It's working, I admitted. Every morning I wake up scared. Scared they'll find a way. Scared the judge will believe them. Luke took my hands in his. They don't have Graham's voice. We do. The next week brought our first major break. Margot called with news. She had found attorney Morrison. He was retired, living in a small apartment in Knoxville, but he remembered Graham clearly. "Agnes Whitmore," he said, according to Margot. "I remember her well. Sharp as a tack, that woman. I drafted her will 15 years ago. She was very specific about what she wanted." "Did she ever change it?" Margot asked. "Never. I would have known. She was the kind of client who checked in every few years to make sure everything was still in order. Last time I heard from her was about 18 months ago. She wanted to confirm the farm went to her granddaughter, Clara Whitmore. No one else." Margot got Morrison to sign an affidavit swearing to the authenticity of the original will and confirming that Graham had never contacted him about any changes. "That's good," Margot said when she called me. "But it's not enough. We need to find out how they created the fake will. Who notarized it? Who witnessed it? There's a paper trail, and if we can follow it backward, we can prove it's fraudulent." The fake will had been notarized by a woman named Sheila Harmon. Margot's investigator tracked her down in a trailer park outside Knoxville. When the investigator showed her a copy of the document with her stamp on it, she broke down crying. "They told me it was just a formality," Sheila said. "Trent Duvall said his grandmother wanted to update her will, but she was too sick to come to the office. He said she'd signed it in the hospital. He just needed me to stamp it." "So you notarized a document without the signer present?" "I needed the money," Sheila whispered. "My son, he's sick. The medical bills were piling up. Trent paid me $500 cash. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't think anyone would get hurt." Margot had Sheila sign a sworn statement confessing to the fraudulent notarization. She also agreed to testify in court, in exchange for immunity from prosecution. "That's our smoking gun," Margot told me. "With Morrison's affidavit, Sheila's confession, and Graham's video, we can prove the will is fake. But I want more. I want to bury them." The more came from an unexpected source, the bank. Graham had a small savings account at the White Pine Community Bank. After her death, I had assumed the account would be frozen pending probate. But when I called the bank to check, the manager told me something that made my blood run cold. "Ms. Whitmore, the account was closed 3 days before your grandmother's death. The entire balance, $42,000, was withdrawn in cash." "By whom?" The manager checked the records. "A man named Trent Duvall. He had a power of attorney document." "Is something wrong?" "Fax me that document," I said. "Right now." The power of attorney was dated 3 months before Graham's death. It was signed with a signature that looked like Graham's but wasn't. I knew her handwriting well enough to spot the differences. The witnesses were the same names from the fake will. The notary was Sheila Harmon. Trent had been draining Graham's accounts while she was still alive. "Bank fraud," Margot said when I sent her the document. "That's a federal crime. This just got a lot more serious for your cousins." A week later, the DA's office in Jefferson County announced they were opening a criminal investigation into Trent and Jenna Duvall. The charges under consideration included forgery, fraud, elder financial abuse, and filing false documents. When Trent found out, he called me for the first time since the kitchen. I answered. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear his voice now that the tables were turning. "You think you're so smart," he hissed. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning, Clara. I'm going to tie this up in court for years. By the time it's over, you'll be bankrupt from legal fees. You'll lose the farm either way." "Graham knew what you were," I said. "She recorded everything. The whole world is going to hear her tell you to get out of her room. How do you think that's going to look in court?" Silence. "Then, you're bluffing." "March 14th, I said. You and Jenna. You brought a folder. You told her Clara's going to sell the farm. She told you to get out. Remember?" The line went dead. In a small town like White Pine, news travels faster than the mail. By the time the criminal investigation was announced, everyone within 20 miles knew that the Whitmore cousins were at war. Some people took my side. Marnie, who ran the feed store, stopped me after church one Sunday to squeeze my hand and say, "Your Gram was a good woman. She'd be proud of you." Old Mr. Henderson, who'd farmed the neighboring plot for 60 years, came by with a basket of tomatoes and a gruff, "Don't let those vultures win." But not everyone was friendly. Trent and Jenna had been spreading their own version of the story, that I had manipulated Gram in her final days, that I'd isolated her from the rest of the family, that I was the greedy one. A few people believed them. The Whitsons, a family that had clashed with Gram years ago over a property line dispute, suddenly became Trent's loudest supporters. Mrs. Whitston cornered me at the Piggly Wiggly to tell me that family should work things out privately and that I was airing dirty laundry by going to the police. I pushed my cart past her without a word. Luke had told me not to engage, and he was right. The hardest blow came from a woman named Diane Harper. Diane had been one of Gram's closest friends. They'd gone to church together for 40 years, served on the same committees, played bridge every Thursday. After Gram died, Diane had brought me a casserole and offered to help with the funeral. I'd thought of her as an ally. Then I got a call from Margot. "Clara, we have a problem. The defense has a new witness. A woman named Diane Harper. She's claiming your grandmother told her, repeatedly, that she was planning to change her will in favor of Trent and Jenna." "That's impossible," I said. "Gram would never have said that. Diane's lying." "Can you prove it?" I couldn't. That was the worst part. I knew in my bones that Diane was either mistaken or lying, but I had no way to prove it. Gram's video proved what happened on March 14th, but it didn't prove what she did or didn't say to Diane on some other day, in some private conversation. Why would she do this? I asked Luke that night. She was Gram's friend. She knew what Trent and Jenna were like. Luke shook his head slowly. Maybe Trent got to her. Maybe he paid her. Or maybe she just wants attention. You know how some people are, they want to be part of the story, even if it means lying. Whatever the reason, Diane's statement was a problem. If the defense could cast enough doubt on Gram's intentions, the judge might rule that the will was valid regardless of the forged signature. Margot wasn't panicked, but she was cautious. "We need to discredit Diane," she said. "I'll have the investigator look into her. In the meantime, don't talk to her. Don't talk about her. Let us handle it." The investigator found the dirt within a week. Diane Harper had filed for bankruptcy 3 years earlier, and she had a history of unpaid debts. More importantly, a deposit of $10,000 had appeared in her checking account 3 days after she agreed to testify for the defense. The deposit came from an LLC registered to Trent Duval. "Witness tampering," Margot said with grim satisfaction. "That's another charge for Trent. And it completely destroys Diane's credibility." When the DA presented the evidence to Diane, she recanted her statement. She admitted that Trent had paid her to lie. She said she was sorry, that she'd been desperate, that she'd made a terrible mistake. She sent me a letter apologizing. I read it once and then threw it in the fireplace. Some betrayals, you just can't forgive. With the criminal case building momentum, Margot decided it was time to take depositions from Trent and Jenna. A deposition is like a mini trial. The witnesses have to answer questions under oath, in front of lawyers and a court reporter. Anything they say can be used against them later. Trent went first. Margot had warned me not to attend, my presence might intimidate the witnesses, she said, and that could cause problems for the case. So I stayed home and waited for her call. When my phone rang that afternoon, I grabbed it on the first ring. "How did it go?" Margot's voice was satisfied. "Trent made a mistake. A big one." "What kind of mistake?" "He lied. Under oath. Multiple times. And I caught him in every single one." She explained, during the deposition, she had asked Trent when Gram had signed the new will. He claimed it was in early March, during one of his hospital visits. Margot then produced the video of Graham asking him to leave the hospital room on March 14. She asked him to explain how Graham could have signed a new will for him when she was telling him to get out. Trent changed his story. He said the will must have been signed earlier. February, maybe. Margot then produced Graham's medical records, which showed that Graham had been on heavy sedatives throughout February due to a particularly brutal round of chemotherapy. She would have been in no condition to sign legal documents. The hospital had records of everyone who visited her. Trent's name didn't appear once. So Trent changed his story again. He said Graham must have signed the will at home, before her hospitalization, back in January. Margot then produced Graham's phone records, which showed no calls between Graham and Trent during January. She produced Graham's calendar, which showed no meetings with lawyers. She produced Attorney Morrison's affidavit, confirming that Graham had never contacted him about changing her will. By the end of the deposition, Trent had told 4 different versions of events, and every single one had been disproven by documentary evidence. "He's a terrible liar," Margot said. "He thinks he's clever, but he's not. He just keeps digging himself deeper." Jenna's deposition was even worse, for them. Unlike Trent, who at least tried to spin a coherent narrative, Jenna crumbled under questioning. She cried. She claimed she didn't know the will was fake. She said Trent had handled everything, that she was just following his lead, that she never meant for anyone to get hurt. "Did you push your pregnant cousin to the floor?" Margot asked her. "That was an accident. She was in my way, I just." "Did you step over her bleeding body to get a bottle of wine?" Jenna had no answer for that. By the time the depositions were over, Margot had a complete transcript of both cousins contradicting themselves, implicating each other, and providing more than enough ammunition for a criminal prosecution. "We're ready for court," she told me. "Let's take them to trial." The trial was held at the Jefferson County Courthouse, a grand old brick building in Dandridge with white columns and a clock tower that had been keeping time since 1845. I'd driven past it my whole life without ever going inside. Now I was going to spend 2 weeks there, fighting for my family's legacy. Trent and Jenna were being tried together. The criminal charges included forgery, fraud, elder financial abuse, filing false court documents, and battery. Jenna faced an additional charge of assault on a pregnant woman. If convicted on all counts, they were looking at serious prison time. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wooden benches, a high ceiling, a smell of old paper and floor polish. The judge was a woman named Claudia Ross, who had been on the bench for 30 years and had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. The prosecution went first. They played Graham's video in its entirety. The courtroom was silent as Graham's voice filled the room, her sharp words, her refusal to be bullied, her final get out. I watched the jury's faces. Several of them looked visibly moved. One woman was dabbing at her eyes. Then they called Sheila Harmon, the notary. She walked to the stand looking terrified, her hands shaking as she was sworn in. The prosecutor walked her through her confession, the bribe, the illegal notarization, her knowledge that the document was fake. "Why did you do it?" the prosecutor asked. "I needed the money," Sheila whispered. "My son was sick. I thought it was just a piece of paper. I didn't know what they were going to do with it." "Who paid you?" She pointed at Trent. "Him. He gave me $500 cash." Trent's lawyer tried to discredit Sheila on cross-examination. He brought up her financial problems, her past mistakes, her desperation. But Sheila didn't waver. She had made her confession, and she wasn't taking it back. Then it was my turn to testify. Walking to the witness stand was the hardest thing I've ever done. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was still on modified bed rest. The doctors had warned me that stress could trigger another bleed, but I had to be here. For Graham. For the baby. For myself. The prosecutor walked me through the events of the funeral day, the kitchen confrontation, Jenna's shove, my fall, the blood, the hospital. She showed the jury photographs of my injuries. She read aloud from my medical records: subchorionic hemorrhage, threatened miscarriage, bed rest ordered. How far along were you when this happened? 3 months. And did the defendants show any concern for your condition? I looked at Trent and Jenna. They were sitting at the defense table, avoiding my eyes. No, I said. They stepped over me. Jenna took a bottle of wine from the counter. Trent told me to be out in 2 weeks. Then they left. And the baby? She survived, I said. She's still with me. But every day, I'm afraid I'll lose her. The jury was staring at me. The woman who had dabbed her eyes during the video was crying openly now. When Trent's lawyer stood up for cross-examination, his first words were, "Ms. Whitmore, isn't it true that you've always resented your cousins?" Resented them for what? I asked. For being part of your grandmother's life. For being loved by her. I thought about that. I didn't resent them for being loved by Gram. I resented them for taking advantage of her. For draining her savings. For showing up only when they needed money and disappearing when she needed help. Gram loved everyone. That was her nature. What they did to her was wrong. And yet, you're the one who stands to inherit everything. Doesn't that seem convenient to you? No, I said. It seems like what Gram wanted. She lived with me her whole life. I took care of her. She told me over and over that the farm was mine. The only convenient thing here is a fake will that appeared 3 hours after her funeral. The lawyer tried a few more angles, but I stuck to the truth. The truth was simple. The truth was on my side. When I stepped down from the stand, my legs were still shaking. But I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight for years and had finally set it down. The trial lasted 9 days. 9 days of testimony, evidence, cross-examinations, and objections. 9 days of watching Trent and Jenna sit at the defense table with their expensive lawyers, their faces growing paler and more desperate as each witness took the stand. The bank manager testified about the drained savings account and the forged power of attorney. Attorney Morrison testified about Gram's original will and her consistent intentions. The investigator testified about Diane Harper's bribe and recantation. A handwriting expert testified that Gram's signature on the fake will was almost certainly not genuine. The list went on and on. But the most dramatic moment came on the 6th day, when the prosecution called Jenna to the stand. Jenna had been charged separately from Trent, and her lawyer had argued that she should be tried separately as well. But the judge had denied the motion, and now Jenna had to testify in front of the same jury that would decide her fate. The prosecutor started with the kitchen. "Ms. Duval, did you push Clara Whitmore to the floor on the day of your grandmother's funeral?" Jenna hesitated. I don't remember exactly. It happened so fast. Let me refresh your memory. Your cousin was pregnant. She was asking to see the will. And you, according to multiple witnesses, placed both hands on her chest and shoved her backward. Is that accurate? I might have touched her. I didn't mean to knock her down. Did you step over her body to get a bottle of wine? I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to do, so you got a bottle of wine? The jury watched Jenna with cold, unblinking stares. Then the prosecutor played the March 14th video again. Not for the jury this time, for Jenna. "Ms. Duval, you're about to hear your grandmother's voice. I want you to listen carefully. This is the woman you claim signed a new will giving you her farm." The video played. Gram's voice, clear and strong. "Get out. Both of you. Get out of my room, and don't come back." "Do you recognize that voice?" the prosecutor asked. Jenna was crying now. "Yes." "Whose voice is it?" "My grandmother's." "And in that video, does your grandmother sound like a woman who wants to give you her farm?" Jenna didn't answer. The prosecutor asked again. Still no answer. "Let the record show the witness is refusing to answer," the prosecutor said. The judge peered down at Jenna. Ms. Duval, you are required to answer the question. No, Jenna whispered. She doesn't. No further questions. On the 8th day, the defense made its final, desperate move. They called Trent to the stand. Trent had spent the entire trial looking increasingly agitated. The smirk I remembered from the kitchen was gone. In its place was something raw and twitchy. His expensive suit was rumpled. His eyes darted around the room. His lawyer tried to walk him through a carefully constructed narrative. He had been acting in what he believed was Graham's best interest. Clara had always been hostile to him, the video didn't prove anything, the notary was unreliable, the bank documents were a misunderstanding. But on cross-examination, the prosecutor went straight for the throat. Mr. Duval, did you withdraw $42,000 from your grandmother's bank account 3 days before she died? Trent shifted in his chair. That was for her care. Medical expenses. Medical expenses that were already covered by Medicare? I don't know anything about that. Did you pay Sheila Harmon $500 to notarize a document without the signer present? I paid her for her time. That's standard. Is it standard to notarize a signature you never witnessed? Is that how notaries work? I'm not a notary. I don't know. The prosecutor's voice grew sharper. Did you pay Diane Harper $10,000 to lie about your grandmother's intentions? That wasn't a bribe. I was helping a family friend who was struggling. A family friend who just happened to become a witness for your case? Objection. Trent's lawyer shouted. Overruled, Judge Ross said. Answer the question, Mr. Duval. Trent looked at the jury. At the prosecutor. At the judge. And for one moment, I saw something break behind his eyes. It doesn't matter, he said. None of this matters. She was a dying old woman who didn't know what she wanted. The farm should have been mine. I was her grandson. I was the one who deserved it. The courtroom went completely silent. Mr. Duval, the prosecutor said quietly, are you saying you believe you were entitled to your grandmother's property, regardless of her stated wishes? I'm saying Clara manipulated her. I'm saying the will she signed 15 years ago was made when she was confused. I'm saying. Are you aware that your grandmother recorded a video specifically refuting that claim? She didn't know what she was saying. She was on medication, she was dying. She seemed quite clear in the video. Get out of my room and don't come back. Does that sound confused to you? Trent slammed his hand on the witness stand. I did everything right. I tried to help her. And she threw me out like I was nothing. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. That's not long for a case this complicated. When the bailiff announced that a verdict had been reached, I felt my heart stop. Luke was beside me, holding my hand. Margot was on my other side. The courtroom was packed, neighbors from White Pine, reporters from the local news, even a few people I didn't recognize who must have been following the case. Trent and Jenna were brought in, wearing the orange jumpsuits they'd been issued after the charges were filed. Trent's face was pale and blank. Jenna was crying before the judge even entered the room. Judge Ross took her seat. Will the defendants please rise? Trent and Jenna stood. Their lawyers stood with them. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, an older man with a gray beard, stood up. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of forgery in the first degree, how do you find the defendant Trent Duval? Guilty. On the charge of forgery in the first degree, how do you find the defendant Jenna Duval? Guilty. The foreman read through the list: fraud, elder financial abuse, filing false court documents, perjury, witness tampering, bank fraud. Trent was found guilty on all counts. Jenna was found guilty on all counts except perjury. She hadn't testified enough to be charged with that. Then the foreman reached the final charge. On the charge of battery against a pregnant woman, how do you find the defendant Jenna Duval? Guilty. Jenna let out a sob that echoed through the courtroom. She grabbed her lawyer's arm, but the lawyer pulled away. Judge Ross set the sentencing for 2 weeks later. But before the bailiffs led them away, the judge addressed them directly. "I have been on this bench for 30 years, she said. "I have seen greed, cruelty, and deceit. But the callousness of your actions, to forge a dying woman's signature, to drain her bank account while she lay in a hospital bed, to shove a pregnant woman to the floor and step over her body, is among the worst I have witnessed. You will be facing the maximum penalties allowed under Tennessee law. Bail is revoked. You will be held in custody until sentencing." The bailiffs took them away. Jenna was sobbing so hard she could barely walk. Trent didn't look at me as he passed. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of shock. The moment the doors closed behind them, I turned to Luke and buried my face in his chest. I didn't cry. I had cried enough. But I shook. I shook with relief, with exhaustion, with the sheer overwhelming weight of knowing it was finally over. 2 weeks later, the sentencing hearing was brief. Judge Ross had not been bluffing about maximum penalties. Trent received 12 years for the combined charges of forgery, fraud, elder abuse, witness tampering, and bank fraud. Jenna received 6 years for forgery, fraud, and battery. Both were denied the possibility of early parole for at least half their sentences. The fake will was declared null and void. The original will, the one Graham had signed 15 years ago, leaving everything to me, was entered into probate. The farm was officially, legally, indisputably mine. The day after the sentencing, I woke up in my own bed, in Graham's house, with the morning sun streaming through the curtains. Luke was already up. I could hear him downstairs, making coffee and talking to the barn cat. I lay there for a long moment, one hand on my belly, just breathing. I was still pregnant. Still scared, every day, that something might go wrong. But the fear was different now. It was a quiet background hum instead of a screaming alarm. I could live with it. I got dressed and walked downstairs. Luke had made scrambled eggs and toast. He set a plate in front of me and kissed the top of my head. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Lighter," I said. "Like I can finally breathe." After breakfast, I walked out to the porch. The farm stretched out before me, the rolling pasture, the line of hickory trees, the creek glinting silver in the morning light. This was mine. Not just legally, but in every way that mattered. I had fought for it. I had bled for it. I had faced down the people who tried to steal it, and I had won. But the victory felt strange. Hollow in some places, full in others. I had won the farm, but I had lost the family I'd once hoped to have. Trent and Jenna were in prison. Graham was gone. I was the last Whitmore standing. I thought about what Graham had written in her letter. "Don't let them take what's yours." I hadn't. And I never would again. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. The probate process took time. There were forms to file, taxes to pay, legal loose ends to tie up. But by early summer, the farm was fully transferred into my name. The deed, dated and stamped, arrived in the mail on a Tuesday. I framed it and hung it in the kitchen, right above the spot where I'd fallen. That same week, we got a letter from the state prison. It was from Trent. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it. "Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I'd forgive me, if I were you. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught, I'm sorry I did it. I'm sorry for who I became. I don't know when I turned into the kind of person who would steal from a dying woman and hurt his pregnant cousin. I don't know if I can ever be someone different. But I'm going to try." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it up and put it in the drawer with Graham's letter and the photograph. I didn't write back. I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. But I kept the letter. Not for Trent. For me. As a reminder that even the people who hurt you are still people, broken, twisted, messed up people. You can hold them accountable and still recognize their humanity. That was something Graham would have understood. By August, I was 8 months pregnant and enormous. My belly was so big I couldn't see my feet, and my back ached constantly, and I had to pee approximately every 12 minutes. Luke joked that the baby was going to come out walking and talking, given how long we'd waited for her. The doctors said the pregnancy was progressing normally. The subchorionic hemorrhage had resolved on its own, the way most of them do. The baby was healthy, growing, kicking up a storm every night around midnight. I spent those last weeks of pregnancy doing what Graham would have done, tending the farm. Not the heavy work, Luke handled that, but the small things. The garden. The flower beds. The peonies. Graham's peonies had been her pride and joy. She'd planted them herself, decades ago, along the front walk. Every spring they bloomed in shades of pink and white and deep crimson. But in the last years of her life, when she'd been too sick to tend them, they'd started to thin out. Weeds had crept in. The blooms had gotten smaller. I decided to replant them. Not just the old ones, but new ones too. Dozens of them. I ordered bulbs from a catalog and spent a whole weekend on my hands and knees, carefully, because of the belly, digging holes, mixing in compost, pressing the bulbs into the earth. "What are you doing?" Luke asked, watching me from the porch. "I'm planting Graham's peonies," I said. "For her. And for the baby. I want her to grow up with flowers." Luke came down and helped me dig. The baby arrived on September 17th. A girl. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. We named her Agnes Ruth, Agnes for Graham, Ruth for Luke's mother, who had died when he was a boy. The first time I held her, I sobbed. Not quiet, dignified tears. Ugly, gulping, messy sobs. All the fear and grief and relief of the past months came pouring out of me. Luke sat on the edge of the hospital bed, his arm around my shoulders, and cried too. "She's beautiful," he kept saying. "She's so beautiful." She was. She had Graham's chin. I could see it already, in the tiny scrunched-up face. Graham's chin, and Luke's nose, and eyes that were still the newborn blue that might turn brown later. "Hi, Aggie," I whispered. "I'm your mama. And I'm going to protect you forever." Spring came late to White Pine that year. The winter had been harsh, snow and ice and bitter cold that froze the creek solid. But by April, the ground had thawed, and the first green shoots were pushing up through the soil along the front walk. Aggie was 7 months old. She was sitting up on her own now, grabbing at everything within reach, babbling strings of syllables that almost sounded like words. Luke had built a small fence around the garden to keep her from crawling into the flower beds once she got mobile. For now, she was content to sit on a blanket in the grass while I worked. I was on my knees in the dirt, pulling weeds and checking on the new peony shoots, when I heard Luke come up behind me. "They're coming in good this year," he said. "Better than last year," I agreed. "I think the compost helped." Aggie squealed from her blanket, and I looked over to see her holding up a fistful of grass, triumphant. Luke laughed and scooped her up, swinging her gently until she shrieked with joy. The farm was peaceful now. Truly peaceful, in a way it hadn't been since before Graham got sick. The criminal case was long over. The probate was settled. Trent and Jenna were still in prison, and they would be for years to come. I didn't think about them much anymore. When I did, the anger was still there, but it was quieter. More like an old scar than an open wound. I had planted the peonies for Graham, but also for myself. Every bulb I pressed into the earth was a promise, that I would stay here. That I would raise my daughter on this land. That the Whitmore farm would survive. That evening, after Aggie was asleep and the dishes were done, I sat on the porch in Graham's old rocking chair and watched the sun go down over the ridge. The peony shoots were tiny still, just green fingers poking through the dark soil. But by June, they would be covered in blooms. Pink and white and crimson, just like Graham's had been. Luke came out and sat beside me. He didn't say anything. He just took my hand and watched the sunset with me. I thought about Graham's letter. I thought about her video, her voice filling that courtroom. I thought about the kitchen floor, the blood, the terror. And I thought about how far I had come since that day. Someone asked me once, after the trial, if I regretted what I'd done. If I felt guilty for sending my own cousins to prison. I didn't. And I don't. Because here's the thing I learned through all of this: family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about being there when things are hard. It's about loving people enough to protect them, even when, especially when, protecting them means fighting back. Graham showed up for me, every day of my life. And in the end, she showed up one last time, from beyond the grave, with a letter and a video and a password that changed everything. I didn't destroy my family. I protected what Graham built. I protected my daughter's future. And I learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is draw a line and say, no further. The peonies bloomed in June, just like I knew they would. Pink and white and deep, deep crimson. I cut an armful of them and carried them inside, arranging them in Graham's old crystal vase on the kitchen table. Aggie reached for them with chubby hands, and I let her touch one soft petal. Those were your great-grandmother's, I told her. And now they're yours. She didn't understand. She was too little. But someday she would. Someday I would tell her the whole story, the fake will, the kitchen floor, the video, the courtroom. Someday I would walk her through the same fields Graham had walked me through, and I would teach her the same lessons Graham had taught me. Love fiercely. Work hard. And never, ever let anyone take what's yours. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to my whole story, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? If the people who were supposed to be your family tried to steal everything you loved, would you have fought back the way I did? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if my story meant something to you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you think and that love isn't about sharing DNA, then please subscribe. Hit that bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like mine? They happen every day. And the only way we survive them is by telling each other the truth. Thank you for listening. Stay strong.